Hello everyone. Welcome to the monthly knowledge webinar conducted by Kelp. For all those who are here on this platform for the first time, let me quickly brief you about the monthly knowledge webinar. We at Kelp, along with the Indian Lawyers Association, conduct this monthly knowledge webinar wherein we choose a topic from the PoSH Act or related subject matter and discuss over the same for the next 60 minutes. We also call upon industry specialists as panelists to share their insights and point of views about the topic chosen. Speaking of the panelists, let me quickly introduce you to our extremely talented individuals. The ones that we have here as panelists today, starting with Nupur. Nupur is a practicing advocate in the courts of Delhi since 2007. She has done her law from Campus Law Center, Delhi University. In 2016, she was nominated to be the chairperson of local committee under the PoSH Act under the aegis of District Magistrate New Delhi, and since then she is discharging her duties as the chairperson. In December 2020, she joined the WICCI as Delhi's Anti-Sexual Harassment Council member and soon decided to head a council for state of Uttar Pradesh for women, Indian's Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and launched the Uttar Pradesh Anti-Sexual Harassment Council in March 2021. Sensing the misconception and little understanding about the professional behavior, she had launched her firm, Sashakt Minds, under which she had her team impart awareness sessions and trainings on anti-sexual harassment laws, POSH, as well as POXO acts. It's a mission and vision to spread awareness in public about the rights as well as duties towards each other. Welcome, Nupur.
Thank you, Sakshi, and good evening, everyone. Glad to be here on this important topic.
Our other panelist for the day is Rajni Ravi. We are pleased to introduce a distinguished global finance executive with over 30 years of experience, known for driving operational efficiency and demonstrating exceptional leadership across organizations. With a deep understanding of corporate governance and workplace dynamics, she brings valuable insights into organizational responsibility and culture. Today, she will be sharing her perspective on the evolving dynamics of the PoSH Act 2013 and critical role individuals play in fostering safe and respectful and compliant work environment in organizations. Hello Rajni.
Hi Sakshi, thank you for your kind introduction. Hello everyone, good to be here.
Our topic for the day is who is an employer? Now, as per the PoSH Act, we do have a definition at play stating that a business head, a person that heads the unit, or a group of board of directors could be an employer. However, when we actually have to apply this in real life and understand who actually could be the position of employer, we often are left in a confusion. Thus, to see and understand the various aspects and perspectives this particular topic has, we are going to have a set of questions that we'll be asking to both of our panelists who will further enlighten us with their point of views and the industry best practices to understand who is an employer and how to go about a situation where the employer is in the place of a respondent or accused in case of sexual harassment. Having said that, I'll not waste much time and immediately start asking questions. My first question is to you, Nupur. Who is legally considered the employer under the PoSH Act, and why is this definition so broad?
The purpose of law is actually the social legislation welfare. It's about the protection of women. And that is why the definition is so broad. Who is the employer? Because if we see the employer, this is in like 3 or 4 parts. First is about all the entities or organizations or institute which are associated with the government or the local authority. And it simply says head of that organization, which is also actually the workplace definition that organization institutes everything. The head is the employer. Second part is very important, which says that, okay, in any workplace which is not covered by this government or local authorities, so the person, and now the word is person, any person who is responsible for the management, supervision, and control. And there is an explanation also. It can be a person, it can be board, or it can be committee, but who is responsible for formulation and administration of policy for such organization. So if we go by like a narrow interpretation that anyone who is for the management, supervision and control. So for example, if I say that any bank, if we take, they have so many branches and they all are headed by the manager. Okay, the bank head. So can we say that all bank managers are the employer? We can't. However, they are responsible for the day-to-day management, but they are not the one who are responsible for formulation or administration of policy. So it has to be read that who is that person that we have to see who is the managing or responsible formula, who is formulating the policy or doing the administration work. So that is, and that can be contractual person also as per clause 3. It is not necessary that it has to be founder or CEO or the board of directors, anyone. That can be contractual person also. So the intent is basically to see who can fall in this so that every person can be, they can be one person, I say, or board or committee who is responsible and who we have to give some command that because PoSH provides so many responsibilities, so many roles on the employer. Every place employer is part of, from formulation of a PoSH committee, from providing all the necessary, which all the requirements with the IC required for ensuring that smooth flow of case flow or the recommendations which has to be done, that every place employer has a very important role. So that many companies, what they do, they delegate these responsibilities to this or that. But by delegation, no one can become the employer. They are only the delegated persons. Employer has to be one authority who are responsible for this formulation and administration of just. And that is the point which even we can see the which is coming from the various judgments of court. One can see who's not from the legal background. I know people get confused that okay, Delhi High Court said this, but Mumbai High Court is saying this, but Guwahati High Court is saying this. But when I read all those judgments, the crux is basically when they go into what are the roles and responsibility of that particular person who is before that court. They are not going by the designation of that person or by the whatever terminology. So if anyone is saying I am the prince, I am one of the directors, they are not going by that. If I am saying that I am the president, they are not going by that. Who they are seeing that who is the person who is the responsible for these formulation and administration of policies. They are going into that roles and responsibilities, and then only they are deciding whether this person can be said as employer or not.
Yes. Thank you, Nopal, for that. Actually, that reminds me of an instance wherein got to know that the board of directors had given their rights to act as an employer to one of the heads of the organization to form the policies, to create or constitute the internal committee. However, later it was found that that particular individual was acting in the capacity of an employer and assuming that I have the power, so I am an employer and nobody can touch me. So I think that understanding needs to be very clear that you have been provided with these rights. You just have to discharge those rights in that particular, situation, and you are not assumed to be an employer in particular state. So yes, thank you.
Delegation itself does not make anyone employer.
Yes.
Rajni will, I believe, want to say something or support that because
Very much,
that is
very much
actually
aligned. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, very much aligned. If I may, uh, for me, the crux of being an employer under the PoSH Act is substance over actual printed matter. So it is the intent of the law to protect the women in a workplace. And in that capacity, whoever has that authority to provide her a safe and secure environment in which she can work without being in the fear of harassment, to me that is the crux. So, and I will go a step beyond to say, sorry Nipur, you're a lawyer, but even beyond legal interpretation, there is a moral and a social obligation for anybody who employs anyone, not just women. I'm very proud of the fact that our organization is gender neutral on POSH, but still take the essence of the act in itself. I think it is an obligation and it is a duty that needs to be discharged, irrespective of whether you have a legal ruling in your favor or not.
Absolutely. The safe culture is actually everyone's responsibility. So, right. Yes.
Having said that,
Or if
moving
I
on.
preempted your question, Sakshi.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you so much for both of your inputs. Moving on, the next question to you, Rajni. Can IC handle cases against seafood positions? What will be the challenges and benefits of the IC handling a case when the person is of a superior authority?
Actually, it's a very good question, but thankfully, in my case, it's hypothetical because we have not had such a situation. But let me put it in context. C suite is part of the so called senior leadership team in any organization. But like Nipur was taking so much pains to point out, a single person is not the employer, especially in an organization. By mentioning C suite, you are referring to a organization. It is not a personal employer. So let's leave that scope out of the way. In an organization where there is a senior leadership team, where there is a C suite, it is made up of an uh, gathering of individuals, but the legal entity is distinct and separate from the people who constitute that entity, right? So a C suite member, just by being a member of a senior leadership team, does not get immunity against any of the obligations or duties, especially under the PoSH Act. So, yes, there is a bit of a challenge because the very people you have trusted with the responsibility of enacting the provisions of this act is he or herself or himself gone against the intent of the act is a sad incident. However, the organization is distinct and separate from the individual who has currently been complained against. So it, for all practical matters, he or she should be asked to step aside from their duties temporarily until the IC committee takes on the investigation and do all that is required of them to be done legally. And I don't think this person gets any kind of consideration or concessions or an immunity from the provisions of the POSH Act. I don't know if I've addressed it. Nupur, invite your comments.
So I have handled one such matter. So I'll say that where the person is at the level of director is the and there's a group of companies. Unfortunately, when they have more directors and the C-suite level people, and when the complaint came, the actually they took a decision to that because PO needs to be very strong. That is why it says that senior female leader that has to be there. So the another director was a senior female. She was PO, and they reconstituted the committee because of this case because the complaint was against a C-suite person, and they took all the strong hold people there, and we did the inquiry. In fact, within the time frame, and we found him guilty. And we did that. But yes, there are challenges. But when you're talking about C-suite, as Rajni rightly said, it is about the company who have more people. There are people under that provision. So it is not that there are not other employees who they are, all the employees have to be junior, which can be like addressed by them. So it is okay. They have to be another. That is why, in fact, I think the board of directors also say that female director is like now required, and that is a good point that female director should be there in the company so that these kind of things can be handled.
Yes, rightly said. And I feel the way you said that this particular organization or, they took a stand, they reconstituted it, they ensured that we look into the particular case. But will all the organizations be comfortable enough to do that? And will your employees trust you? That if I'm filing a complaint with this internal committee against a person who is seated above them, they'll still go ahead and investigate the case in an unbiased manner. So having that trust of the employee is very important in the
That is
within the
very
internal
important section.
committee.
In fact, I would like to point out in this particular case, we received the complaint. I don't know if I informed you in the earlier session or not. This particular complaint we received when the complainant has already served her, she resigned, she served her 30 days notice, and she was leaving the company that I'm going. And then she called the presiding officer that this happened with me. and I am now leaving. I had done everything. And immediately presiding officer took a stand. No, you can't leave like that. Okay, now you're leaving even, but we are going to reverse
Yes.
your resignation. We are not accepting. We are keeping it on hold. Let us do the inquiry. And after that whole inquiry, we found him guilty, and we asked her to join back, and the action was taken against that director. And she
Hmm.
joined back. So I'm sure after this, everybody has that trust in the organization.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that
So
is
I
required.
think one such example is important to set the tone there.
Yes.
Yes. So the next question is to you, Nupur. How do we understand the role of IC and employer in the business sense?
Role of IC and employer.
The employer.
It starts with the employer basically, where we have to identify who is the employer. Like every organization, Companies Act does not provide the definition of employer. It provides that in private limited or company is the or employer. Like there is no other definition of employer that okay, this person or this board or there's a company. So when we are formulating with a policy, when I start with it, I always tell them that start with identify who will be discharging these duties,
Hmm.
and I try to incorporate that in my policy. The people are know that okay, what is their role, because somebody, we can't say that company will do everything. Somebody has to take charge of that, or I have to see like what are their roles and which director has this role and responsibility, that this director is required as per their role and responsibility to do the legal compliances, because PoSH is legal. So that will is the person who will be do the all the check the compliances part. And that then it is the role that that director will actually formulate the IC, support the IC in case handling. The posters is actually their responsibility. All the awareness trainings is the
Yes.
responsibility of employer. It is
Yes.
not the responsibility of IC
Or the HR for that matter.
or the HR. That can be delegated, but it is the
Yes.
responsibility of employer only.
Yes.
IC role is only for the prevention protection is there, but like they can do the awareness, but it's mainly to handle the complaints, to see if there is any complaints, how to address that, redress that. Every other responsibility, prevention and protection is of employer. And also then filing of annual report. We believe we give this to okay, I see that you prepare this annual report and file it, but there are two sections, 21 and 22.
Yes.
21 says that IC will prepare the details of the complaints which they got, because that is the
Yes.
only role, and they will send it to the employer. And then
Yes.
employer will prepare under 22 all the details, whether they have put the posters, whether they are trainings, whether they are anything else, and then that will be sent to the district officer. So
Yes.
it is very distinct role. So which generally companies actually do everything on IC, but it is very distinct roles, and they
Yes.
have to work together as well, because
Yes.
IC needs a lot of support from the employer. They need to maintain confidentiality. They need their support. If they need some other different venue for having cases, they need somebody to type or transcribe with confidentiality. It is all the employer work who has to do.
Yes. I think somewhere the employer and the IC, has a difference of opinion amongst themselves, saying that this is your work and this is my work. And eventually the IC ends up doing that because, of course, it's the employer who's asking them to do it. But yes, the Act very clearly defines the roles and, responsibilities of both the parties. However, I think from the employer's point of view, they have to be more involved in understanding what are the aspects of POSH and what is expected out of them. For ICs, we usually have all sort of IC trainings and awareness sessions conducted, so they know that this is what we have to do. But when it comes to the employer, I think they are still in a
So I think, second, because I'm happy to conduct few trainings for the leadership role as
yes,
well, and that is very
yes,
important. They don't understand
yes.
because it is not mandatory, so they nobody do it. But few companies who now believes it, they call for the leadership trainings as well. Okay, tell us what is our role. In that, we don't tell them about that, because content of all the trainings are very different. In leadership training, we tell them what is your role. Like, exactly, it is not the IC role.
True that. Thank you, Nupur, for that. The next question is to you, Rajni. How does employer definition identification differ across organizational structures?
First of all, when an organization, across organizations, the org design is very, very different. It's diversified. You have anything from a lean pyramid to a flat structure. So it's not easy to predict the levels of hierarchy or the managerial positions that the company has in stock, right? And especially in the case of multinational organizations like ours, the employer, in the strictest sense, if you want to interpret, could be the top company, but then we have these subsidiary companies set up for various functions, for various regions, for various geographies, and then you have senior leadership set up in those individual companies. Then it gets a bit more ambiguous, because when you say a particular employee, let's say they belong to the entity in India, and that person for that legal entity, who is the employer? Is it the top person in the Indian entity? Is it the board of directors of the Indian entity? Or is it, in the broader sense of the term, let us take Inchcape shipping. So Inchcape as the employer is a global one. We have leadership sitting at the very top in our parent company. So is it that? So these are the challenges that we navigate in these modern day setups, because more often than not, these standalone companies have ceased to exist. Everybody, in some form or the other, is associated in a global conglomerate, and we need to identify. But the simplest way to put it is, again, I come back to my favorite interpretation of substance and intent of the PoSH Act, right? It is to protect women from sexual harassment in their workplace. Now, for a person who is in India, who has a workplace in India, for all practical purposes, the interpretation is she is belonging to the entity which is operating within the Indian framework of legal setup. And for all practical purposes, that Indian entity would be deemed to be the employer. And again, when we look at the composition of the internal committee, not necessarily senior leaders have to be the member of the IC. It
Mm,
could be a
yes.
representative from HR, it could be a representative from, say, QHSSE or some other department. And hierarchy or seniority or designation does not matter for composition of IC. So, in that sense, IC is very, very distinct from the role of an employer. That's the way I see it. And I think it makes sense even along legal interpretation. So, in short, for an Indian entity or for any organization doing business in India where POSH is applicable, the definition of employer has to be in relation to that entity and whoever has been entrusted with the roles and responsibilities of the employer, be it to formulate the policy under the POSH Act, be it to set up an internal committee, be it to raise awareness, that role would be considered employer.
Right, Rashmi. Thank you so much for that. The next question is to you, Nupur. What are the common mistakes organizations make in assuming who could be the employer?
Like I said, the we discussed that person who is delegated, ma'am, or any of the directors, if they have board of directors, so they assume that they have the responsibility of being the employer. They are discharging their duties, so they are the employers. And frankly, in fact, in one of the company I saw when I was going through their policy, they said employer includes their CHRO directors, everyone they in the C-suite. I told them, okay, this is what are you doing? You are actually doing a blunder that you can't do this, including everyone. Like, okay, the CHRO, also CEO, also directors, also managing director, also everyone is employer. So it has to be very careful, like who has to be the
Yes.
employer. You cannot just assume. You have to understand the roles, responsibilities, who is going to fulfill that, and whether that person is actually responsible for those formulation of
Yes.
policy. Because not everyone is formulation. Like HR, even if they are working on policy, or the CLOs is working on a policy, does not make that they are finalizing or formulating the policy. It has to be approved by the someone. So
Yes.
that has to be understood, and also the repercussions also as well. that it is
Yes.
why it is so important role. It has to be seen. Just not include everyone into the employer category.
Yes, yes. And I feel, defining this definition or defining the individual who would be in the position of employer and what are the duties that they're discharging should also be communicated to the employees. At times, organizations may be clear that, okay, this is our employer, but employees do understand that if there's a case against the person who's an employer, my IC will not take it up. It will go to the local committee. So when do I reach out to local committee? Who is sitting in the position of employer is a big question mark. Even in PoSH policies, we exclusively ask organizations that could you please tell us who is an employer, because we just don't want to write the exact definition from the PoSH Act saying that employer, a business unit, a board of director. No. Let the individuals know that this is the employer. However, if there's a case, your IC is still in the capacity to take it up because there's someone above them who will implement our recommendation. So I think that clarity needs to be provided to the employees as well.
Absolutely. I tell all my clients to write in the policy in a very clear term that who is the employer. I never write it the only the person who is responsible for day-to-day management. That makes no sense because
Yes.
that will not inform employees anything. They will anyways get confused. Like, okay, now who is that person? We don't know. Like in the big company structure, like who is that person?
True. Very true. Yes. Thank you for that, Nupur. Next question is to you, Rajni. How should employers handle PoSH compliance in group companies and shared workplaces?
Oh, can you
Repeat
elaborate
it.
on what do you mean by group companies? I can understand a
So,
shared workplace, but what's your
yes.
definition of a group company?
So when there are, there could be a subsidiary company, there could be a parent company, and employers are different for all of these entities. So when employees go to a subsidiary company to work for a while, and if there's a shared entity, they just randomly work there, and then there's something happening there, and then they're not sure at which IC do I go to, which workplace do I go, who's the employer here. So how do we define that clearly for them?
For me, the guidance comes from workplace because where it has happened, does it fall within the definition and the purview of workplace? Because they might be working, to take your example, deputed in another company, group company. And for example, somebody in Mumbai has been asked to come and work in Delhi, let us say, and it happens in the Delhi premises. So, first, of course, they should be reaching out to the internal committee, I think, of the place where the incident has actually occurred. Now, it is up to the company framework how it has been set up, but the employer definition in this case, like I said in my earlier question, it depends on the way the company has been structured. Let us take the example you've given where it's a group company but within India, right?
Yes.
In that case, the topmost company in the Indian framework, which is actually handling the employment, the transfers, the deputations, would be the employer. Nupur can either validate that or have a different opinion. But regarding which IC committee to reach out to, I think logically it follows that the person has incurred an incident and she wants to report it. It should be to the IC of the workplace where the incident has happened, and then it is entirely up to that company's policies and procedures to see whether it gets escalated to the IC of the global organization or it is to be handled at the level of the subsidiary company where the incident has occurred.
I think that gives us much clarity on how to handle such cases coming up, and how the employer also should know that this is how we go ahead when such a situation arises. Thank you for that. Next question is to you, Nupur. Can liability be delegated once the internal committee is constituted?
Liability is basically, you are saying the penalties, because liability is it's not about the responsibility we are talking. So no, it can't be, because PoSH Act is very clear that it is the employer.
Yes.
Employer might be delegating the responsibilities. They can't delegate the liabilities. If
Yes.
something is not done properly, for like or if there's a non-compliance of any section of PoSH, it will be the employer who will be the responsible. Liabilities of the employer, because what is the ultimate penalty under the PoSH Act? Suspension of license. You can't suspend the HR for that.
Exactly.
HR is not working under license. It is the company or whatever the organization is. So obviously liability cannot be delegated. Okay, non-compliance is there, then the government can put the penalty on the HR that this HR will not work anywhere. That can't
Yes.
be done. Okay,
Yes.
it has to be on the employer only. Also, the 50,000 penalty, we go by like maximum 50,000 or anything, that will not be deducted from the HR. That will be deducted from the company only, means the organization, employer. There's nothing on that. So liabilities cannot be delegated. It is the responsibility of the employer that every compliances has to be met, and liabilities of the employer only.
Yes.
It can't be delegated.
Yes, and you're right. And I think for that particular reason, we need to be create more awareness for the employers and the leaders that listen, this is your responsibility. You may delegate it, but at the end, if it's not fulfilled, if you are non-compliant, you will be held responsible for that.
Right, that the negative impact will be on the company only. It is not on the
Yes.
HR. Means they can take action against the HR that we have delegated this responsibility to you. That is internal. But the major penalty which is under the PoSH is not internal penalty. It is through the appropriate government. And that will impose penalty only on the employer,
Yes.
not going on the employees.
Thank you. Thank you, Nupur, for that. The next question is to you, Rashni. What employer actions build survivor trust in the complaints process?
If you aspire to be branded as a good employer or a safe place to work, I think it goes beyond paying lip service to PoSH Act. Sorry, I'm using some harsh words, but the intent has to be that you're committed to the idea of providing a safe environment for your women employees, right? And more importantly, a secure place where they are not fearful of voicing a complaint. It is not a good badge for the company to wear that there have been no PoSH complaints in the company. It is more, it could, I mean, it might mean that there are incidents happening, but you have not given them the confidence that it's okay to come out and raise a complaint, irrespective of who has perpetrated the act, right? So I think it's socially secure environment and a safe place with no fear of retribution or retaliation by the employer. That is the crux of the obligation of the employer. Right? It has to happen irrespective of whether it falls within the definition of the provisions of the PoSH Act or not. And more importantly, for me, the interpretation is that every single employee, in this case, a female employee, every single female employee in the organization not only feels safe and secure, but does not have fear of speaking up, irrespective of against whom it is. So the line that I often use in all my skip level meetings with my employees is, anything that you say will not be held against you, will not be recorded against your name. It is entirely safe to speak up, irrespective of to whoever you want to. If you want to speak up something against me, I'll happily share the credentials of my line manager. You can, because though I am the PO, it is not like I have an authority. Oh, I am immune because I am the one who's taking care of all the PoSH responsibilities. No, like Nupur keeps pointing it out at every point in time, the employer is different from the visible leader. So the visible leadership, the person on the ground, the person who's acting as the general manager of the office, the person who's taking administrative decisions in the day-to-day working of the company, that's a completely different lens. And the person who is in principle the employer, and the members of the internal committee, because many a times in many organizations I see that members of the IC are the name and the face of PoSH, and people don't go beyond that. So like you said, Sakshi, the education of the differentiation between the employer and the members of the IC has to happen, and that can only happen through regular workshops, seminars, webinars, and having experts from posh, this one practitioners come and talk to the people, give practical examples, give case studies, says, okay, this is a hypothetical situation, but God forbid if you ever find yourself in any of these situations, you have every right to come and talk to the people in the organization and raise a complaint in the IC. So it's a very overarching responsibility which will guide you to do the right thing in the organizations, I think.
Thank you for that, Rashni. And I feel out of whatever you said, I think it also, comes to a point wherein the employer should trust the IC that if I have constituted an IC, they will work well and they will come out with a recommendation that I just have to implement. That kind of trust between the employer and the IC is also very important, because I've observed in certain situations wherein the employers push back on the recommendations of the IC, saying that this is a valuable resource, we need this person in the organization. If you end up doing that, you are losing the trust of your employees, right?
No, no, very true. I fully subscribe to your point that you should not see who is the complainant and who is
Yes.
the defendant.
Yes.
The focus should always be on the what, where, and how rather than the who. So that is a very clear distinction that we need to follow.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. The last question to you, Nupur. How can employers move beyond compliance towards meaningful implementation of PoSH?
See, it starts from the basic only, starting from the policy as well. Your policy has to be clear. Okay, because policy is the first document which employees see generally, and they have to be clear, like, okay, what is the process of filing, how to file, where, who are the members of the internal committee, who is the employer, what all recommendations can I have. I have seen many times where policy are silent about the interim protection or the retaliation. They are so employees don't know that they are protected. They have some protection even if they file. So fear starts from there only. Okay, so there's no protection. What will happen? And they will not talk about it. And then again, the confidentiality clause. We make such a hue and cry about the confidentiality, then people start even speaking about it. That okay, something happened, it will come back to me. Starting from that, it has to be very simple and clear terms policy, and then the trainings are also major part, like what it cannot be simple training about what the law says. Okay, this happened. It has to be actual as per the culture of the organization, what culture you want to set up in your organization. And also one of the most important part I see, that regarding how to file a complaint, where at like where to file a complaint. Generally what they do, they give the email IDs of the IC members. They don't make a separate email ID. And for example, I'm not going to say whether it's a case of sexual harassment or not, but the TCS matter only. So they are making complaints on the personal ID. I don't know if they have PoSH ID or not, but what the newspapers are saying that complaint has gone on the official email ID of the person, concerned person, and they had not responded. So official email ID, again, it is the person who is only that, but PoSH email ID is very different. So that has to be, that gives some authority. They now the TCS released the statement that we have not received any PoSH complaint, and now we don't know what complaint they have received on their official email ID. But if there is an official email ID of PoSH, complaint goes there, people will treat it as PoSH. They will not have to say ki, okay, this was not a PoSH. Committee has to sit and consider. Then it will be collective decision, not a decision of one person.
Very true.
Because so these are very important tips. Then started from the trainings are then so much important, like employees training is based on what culture you want to set up, and then how to properly go with the complaint, what to expect from the IC. And then IC training is very again different, that how to handle it. And as we already discussed that, okay, not to be like see that who is the agreed person or who is the respondent. Don't be judged by that. It has to be very unbiased and everything. That is again very different. And the leadership training, and as somebody actually mentioned, active bystander. People think that again, just a tick mark, PoSH is just a tick mark, do the mandatory training once a year. That is actually not enough. you have so many different trainings. Okay, do one employee training, do another active bystander, do another manager HR, because their role is also important. Do leadership trainings. That is all the how the good culture actually set up. So,
Yes.
and then again, don't pressure or the IC for handling something. But they have to keep a check that IC is not biased. IC is doing handling cases within the timeline. That only you have to check, nothing beyond that. And then obviously follow the recommendations. So that PoSH Act itself, it's just a small act, but it gives so many responsibilities and it gives a clear framework how to make your organization safe.
Yes, and I think it's also the sense or the attitude that the top level works with. I have observed that in an organization, we would get questions like my CEO is asking how many number of sessions to conduct. Is it important? Is it written somewhere? Why are you all telling us to have more than one session? And
Mm.
then there was an organization wherein the employer extensively sat in with the IC throughout the session, understood his roles and responsibilities, understood the IC's roles and responsibilities, was throughout there through the session, through the setting up of the constitution, because he wanted to know what exactly can I do in my startup or in my organization to ensure that people are safe here. So I think that kind of attitude makes the real difference. If that attitude does not show up, there shall be no trust within the organization. So,
Absolutely. In fact, I am fortunate to work with one organization which is started with leadership training. And when I give them the leadership training, I ask them to sit in the employees training as well and the IC training as well. And everyone sits there. Okay, they attended IC as well and then they attended the employees as well. So that our trust develop within the employees as well. Okay, our leaders are also sitting here and understanding everything, what the issues are. So that trust is built up. So started from leadership. They said that we'll start with leadership and then they'll this.
thank you, Nupur. Thank you, Rashni, for that. So my set of questions are over. I think we do have one or two questions in the chat. So I'll quickly read out those questions. The first question is from Poonam Pandey. What are the roles of IC nodal officer and do we need to display the details of nodal officer? So I think she's referring to the nodal officer of SHE box. So any one of you who would like to take it up?
Yeah, so basically, nodal officer is under the law, under the PoSH Act, is defined under Section 6, and that is only for the at the local level. IC has no nodal officer, or the internal organizations have no, private organizations have no nodal officer as per the law. SheBox only provides for the nodal officer, and that is basically the compliance officer, that person who will be the compliant. So like we are discussing, the person who has been delegated with the powers to oversee that all compliances has been done, and that is the person who is the nodal officer. It can be employer as well, it can be the HR as well, or anyone who is actually looking for the compliances, that okay, this case is there and they cannot see what the complaint is there if it is filed through the SheBox, because it is only for the purpose of SheBox. The nodal officer has no other purpose regarding that. It is only through the SheBox. So if complaint comes through SheBox, then they can see that okay, the complaint has come, and they can check with the chairperson that have you seen, or the presiding officer, have you seen that their complaint is there? Please take up this, and that's it. They have to just see okay, within 90 days it is done or not. So that is the purpose of nodal. And then if yes, they have to, if the when as and when government says that annual reports has to be uploaded, or anything, then that will be the also the responsibility of that nodal officer. It is not required to be displayed as such, because that is only for the purposes of SheBox, not for any other purposes within the organization. That is my understanding. Within organization, it is not required.
Not really required. I am in line with whatever you said, Nupur. Within the organization is not required. The next question is from Ashok Mehta. Who will be the employer in the case where a third party employee is respondent and the complainant is from the principal employer company? Which IC will accept the written complaint of the complainant and proceed with the proceedings?
Rajin ma'am, do you want to take up this?
No, I'm just trying to get the question on my screen because it's a long one. Uh,
Yes.
Yeah, I got it. Who will be the employer in the case where a third party employee? I am not sure what he means by third party employee. Let me break it down as I understand it.
All right.
Okay, if it's a third party, he cannot fall under the definition of an employee. That is my first thing. The respondent is the respondent, okay, and the complainant is from the principal employer company, which IC will accept the return complaint. Now, the person who's complaining, the complainant is from an employer company. So that person is going to, that lady employee, I believe, is the complainant, will be giving the complaint to the IC of the, in this definition, principal employer company, because she has undergone an experience which she feels is under the PoSH Act, and she is going to give the complaint to the IC of that principal employer company. Now, in this case, the respondent happens to be not an employee of the same company. That's what I understand from the question. So the question here is, who will accept the written complaint? The written complaint has to come to the IC of the complainant's organization. That is a very clear cut case. But the question is, what can IC do in the case where a respondent is of an external organization? That is a separate matter. I don't know if I've addressed what they wanted to ask.
I think it did serve the purpose.
Right. So basically, as even after the Dr. Sohail Malik case by the Supreme Court, it is very clear that the complainant IC will take up the complaint and proceed with the inquiry. So that case, though, it is actually on the in the context of the government organization and two departments of theirs. So we cannot actually see court has not gone into the private setup at all. However, when we see the definition, so that is my understanding how I read the act, because the definitions clause, uh, employer definition does not say complainant employer or respondent employer. IC does not say complainant or respondent. They are just the definitions, okay, at the workplace, neither the workplace. So the complainant, yes, it is the IC of the complainant, and court has very clearly defined that. Section 11, where the respondent is employee, is basically with respect to the service rules of the respondent, not the filing of the complaint. So the complainant IC will take the complaint and proceed with the inquiry. That is my understanding. And whatever the recommendations is, whether it is against the respondent or against the complainant, respective employer will actually implement it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Both of you, there are no further questions, but I
Yes,
think
that
it
is
is
there.
Mr. Mr.
yes, yes,
Sundararajan
yes.
has said he will ask on voice.
Yes,
Yes.
I was about to click on that. Yes, sir, you may please ask your
Yeah.
questions.
Yes, I will start with Sakshi first. One or two questions more for each one of you. So you said, yes, the important mandatory training under PoSH, it's the law states very clearly, basic training, managers training, and IC training. So whenever I do, I take about 3 hours on basic training. I would say take 3 hours to 4 hours on managers training, because I add DEI also there, and in also enhancing the credibility of the real managers. And then the IC training is a full day exercise. So when I feel that, as you said, sometimes there are no managers training in some organizations, it's very sad part. So they say,
Yes.
no, you complete all the training in 4 hours. So including IC training, it's very real eyewash. So I want to say, based on this, I saw Rajni telling, when I use the word PoSH compliance is only a lip service. Sorry for me to be harsh, he said. It's not to be harsh, it's a fact. I've really told that somewhere they are so, it is better to be harsh than face a harsh reality like TCS or many other organizations. So therefore, I think we as practitioners must insist each one should have its quota. It cannot be a lip service. Now, I want from here I take on to Nupur. Both of you can answer this. One is, yes, it's very unfortunate. Corporates and organizations want lip service training for 4 hours and say I'm compliant, basic training, manager training, IC training, and all like that. Okay. Now, what I want to talk when I come to, now I'll take on this question to Nupur, wherein you said the employer, the definition of employer, an employer is responsible. Very clearly, Supreme Court has said, you did say that, the penalty has to be borne by the employer. Now, Supreme Court has very clearly said, when there's a penalty on the employer, let me say PoSH policy is not there 50,000 rupees, or it is 50,000 rupees for not forming an IC, or like that. The Supreme Court has said almost a year back, which we have addressed also, that the penalty, such penalty should come from the employers. The employer meaning if it is on the CEO, on the company, it has to be borne by the CEO. And Supreme Court did say such recovery being made on the CEO should be furnished to this court for us to evaluate it has been complied with. So penalty under PoSH law never goes to employer, never goes to any. If a respondent is a project lead, project manager, or manager, if he has been levied with fine for certain expenses of the PoSH harassment on the women, it has to be recovered from him only. That is the law. In fact, I've emphasized this very seriously in the training program to know if you are alleged, you have to pay. So better be aware and be a very credible manager not to happen. The law will not say, CEO cannot say, pass it on to finance, finance pay about it. So it should not be there. So this is one I want Nupur to react. And I also, one more I want, this is to tell Nupur that, it's very, very clear. Just a sec. Yeah. Yeah, the responsibility and liability. Responsibility is on the employer because he is the ultimate organizer who is formation and this one. In Industrial Disputes Act, it very clearly says for punishing authority that such person should be, a resolution should be passed by the board that who is appointing authority and who is terminating authority. Because there are cases contested, the person who terminated is not the right person, therefore my termination is not liable. Now in PoSH Act, what has happened? Truly, as Rajni said, even today it is only 70% compliance. Even in the 30%, only 50% of them, that is 15% totally, do mandatory training, build in a culture, comply the annual return as is required, and they send it to the right person, that is a district officer. Biggest non-complier, I think you all will accept, is the government. Because I am now advising the government of Karnataka, where they wanted my help and I'm trying to do that. I found that 90% of them have not even formed an IC. Even Tamil Nadu announced it about 5 months back after the Supreme Court asking for compliance, and the Karnataka did it about 2 months back. I forwarded Tamil Nadu's announcement of the nodal officers. Even they have appointed nodal officers now, and they have formed IC from each taluk officers. They have only notified the taluk officers who will be the presiding officer, but even still now it does not happen. So it's the very pathetic aspect is, I did ask the commissioner, you all are inspecting us, you are all fine faulting with us, and you are trying, you shout from Mount Everest to telling that we are all bad employers. Your organization doesn't have it. So now what I want all of you to answer, last week there was a comment from the Supreme Court has very clearly said and passed an order to all other courts. They should not be hesitant for government of non-compliance on anything, escaping that it is the role clarity is not there. One is shifting to the other department and other functions. That cannot happen, and courts should not hesitate to penalize them very clearly. It has come. Just last week it came in the paper. I can forward that also. Because I do a quarterly review meeting to IC members. I added that in my latest also. So one from Nupur is that employer means it is the role and responsibility. When it comes to penalty, it has to be paid from his hand. Then only there will be sensitiveness, because that's the intent of the legislator in the PoSH Act. Because any penalty done by an offender who is normally a male member, it has to be recovered from him. So one of the big question was, if his salary is so low, if the penalty is so high, from where we can extract? is the employer's question. This was there about 3, 4, 5 years back. Now it's very clear. It is the employer how you should recover it. You can even go through a revenue recovery proceedings. Yeah. So very interestingly, Nupur, I want all of you to answer is in the recent TCS case. I have had this in one company where they had offices in 4, 5 cities, Hyderabad, Vizag, or Chennai, and somewhere else. When a person has been found guilty, and the IC very clearly recommends with the following grounds and fantastic report writing, seeing the several other cases and measuring the punishment also, and question of termination. Now, the CEO says, CEO is definitely, as Nupur said, is the employer. He has to ensure that it is the compliance, the need of the law is complied, and takes the responsibility to see for its execution. Employer says, he gives appointment letter, but he does not want to send or the termination letter. Because it becomes a litigation, he doesn't want to waste his time in the court. He says, head of HR. Head of HR, what he has done is, he has diluted the delegation. For some level, some people, manager HR should be the appointing authority. She is issuing appointment letters. Anybody is giving sweets, even if it is adulterated with poison, we all will take it. Now only after sufficient education, we tell our kids, don't take chocolates even if the marketing man gives you. That may be drugs and you will be kidnapped. So the message is, and then I tell there should be a board resolution, even for PoSH, the terminating and appointing authority. When it comes to termination, nobody wants it. So the manager, the CHRO has diluted to the manager. The manager also is saying, Arey Baba, I was very cushy that I am giving my appointment letter, but termination letter, I am afraid. So is a board resolution necessary for somebody to terminate? Somebody incompetent person is giving an appointment order. That does not mean that is a appointing or terminating authority. I think Nupur to answer from the angle of legal law.
So I would request one of you to
Question.
just
This is
sum
a
it
very
up because, we are
Yeah,
just
because
here.
this
Yeah.
is so long that I almost forget what all the questions are. But however, I believe
But so,
that
Anupur, I would request you to just sum it up because we are just,
yeah, I'm just
about to
submitting up
close.
because I just want to remind that I started with saying that no designation says that by designation we cannot say like CEO is the employer or any person is the employer. The law says that we have to see what all the roles and responsibilities are there, what is that person is doing. So only by delegating, okay, I am the appointing, but I am not terminating, I am delegating it, does not make it this employer. And yes,
Yeah.
employer has to be seen as per the law. That
Yeah.
okay, that what irrespective of that category or the
No,
designation.
I'll
And
give you a precise question. Is a terminating authority need a board resolution? Because only such people are accepted in IDEA. So when it comes to this, so I know one case about 2.5 years back, a person raised that ICS found me guilty, agreed, I've been terminated, but I know the person who has terminated me doesn't have a board resolution right, therefore this termination is invalid. It was accepted by the High Court. They said, okay, let this be rectified and come back to us.
I think we are
Nupur, let me come in here, but I'm not
please.
going to answer his question specifically. But in general, what he's trying to ask is, should that terminating authority be specifically mentioned in the PoSH Act because people absolve themselves of the responsibility?
Yeah,
I am looking at it in a slightly different angle. If the organization is going to try and wash its hands off on something as small as issuing a termination letter, what is that commitment of that organization to uphold the intent and the cultural values that is intended by PoSH at the overall
correct,
level?
correct.
So, to
Yes,
me, it is a top down, right? When you form an organization or when you are in a position of uh, uh, being in a position empowered to formulate the policies and procedures and set the cultural values of the organization, if you are not committed to upholding the intent of the PoSH Act,
correct.
anything and everything else is going to be diluted. So, like
Yes,
somebody put in the chat, I just asked for some external professional to be available for 20 minutes online and call it a training and do a tick box exercise. If all we are trying to do is tick box, then there is no point. To me, PoSH must be an integral part of the company's charter of values, and PoSH Act is nothing but the government's attempt to hold you in line. We all know that Indians are not very good at following discipline or structure anywhere. So the government is trying to do its bit by making certain aspects mandatory. But PoSH is not limited to what is mandatory, is
Correct.
my summation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So we are a
No,
bit
no,
over time. So
Sakshi, before I get an answer, we should not.
Sorry, I have to leave now. I submitted
yes.
55 and thanks
Okay.
to
So you
Rajni
can
for
take it,
this.
we can take it
Yes,
offline, Sundar. You please,
thank you.
share your question
Yeah,
offline.
yeah.
I will definitely
No,
ensure to
no,
take it up.
no, my answer is I will say we would borrow from Industrial Disputes Act that the appointing authority and terminating authority, there should be a board resolution, or the board resolution can authorize the unit person as so and so under the PoSH. For example, if you take TCS 6,70,000 employees, there are some thousands of branches. Now, Nashik branch, have they appointed the head of the Nashik branch as the authority under the PoSH Act? It
Sorry,
may be the
Mr.
CSRO.
Sundarajan. We all have a deadline, a hard close at 5. So apologies. I look forward to your recommendations, making changes in Karnataka government. All the best to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Yeah,
you, everyone.
there
Thank
Thank
are
you
you.
so much.
but
And we'll
there has
definitely circle back
there has
again.
been a very
Thank you.
respectful
Thank you. I
acceptance
take
in.
a leave. Thank you.
Sure,
Yeah, yeah.
sure. Thank you,
No,
Rajni.
you make some very valid points, but it's just that we have to be mindful of the time in a
Yes.
webinar like this.
Sure.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, team. Thank you.